steward of our land, garden communicator, active member of GardenCom International, proud board member of the National Capital Area Garden Club District 1, and of course, a history lover. We are happy to have her back. Welcome, Teri.
Thank you so much. Oh, this is exciting, and I'm so glad to be here. And I want to get started because, as many of you all know, when it comes to talking about the garden, I am here for it and I get excited. So,
All right.
let's get started. All righty. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're living through right now. You all know about me and what I do. I'm always in the garden. You can go back and read this later. I do have a new book out, but later about that. What is this in front of us? It's a hardiness zone map. What does it tell us? It is the accepted standard that we use to determine our plant hardiness. It is a good tool that shares with us how cold it does or doesn't get in the wintertime and how it adjusts what we're growing in our garden. This is important. I did link this. I need you all to access it, print it out, and write your zone down. When I moved back up to the DMV from Fredericksburg 20 years ago, everyone told me, oh, you can't grow camellias. I have a camellia alley on both sides of my house. I knew then, just by standing in the garden of the house I purchased, what was going to work and what wasn't. Now, granted, I've had some hits and misses. You know, camellias need that great air circulation. The ones against the house developed scale. It was too dry. My plants know I invite you in. You're expected to thrive. And most of them do. Remember when it was a time we all looked forward to these beautiful, lush green lawns. Oh, my dad had a zoysia lawn in Northeast DC, Riggs Park. And it was gorgeous. We planted it the year my sister graduated, 1972. It is still like weed-free, thick and lush, walk outside with no shoes on. However, this year, even though zoysia generally doesn't green up until May, the picture on the right shows what a lot of lawns look like this year. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about lawns in the beginning of this presentation because so many people are really into their lawns, but I'm really trying to encourage you to release and let your lawn go. It's okay. A little bit of turf is great, but you don't need all that turf unless you're going to use it. I'm going to say the word that everyone has been scared to say this year. I have been laughing behind the scenes because I realized we were in a drought, honestly, in March. But the way it's been presented to us is that we were, in February, there was an article in the Washington Post that said we're at a precipitation deficit. We're in an almost drought-like existence. And then we got those temperature extremes right after May. And everything I read said it seemed like we were in a drought. They never really owned that word. And then midsummer, it was whispers of a flash drought. Oh my goodness, flash drought. Because we had a little bit of rain, but not a lot. And then they're, kind of gently telling us we've had minimal precipitation. Come on, say the word with me. Drought. It's real. We're in it. Trust me on this. We're in it. Did you know officially on October 1, Maryland, parts of Maryland was classified as being under drought-like conditions. See, we're even in October. It's drought-like. We are in a drought. Own it. We're almost 50% abnormally dry. Let's not kid ourselves. When it comes to that lawn, those brown areas that, they might have greened up a little bit due to rains in September, early October, but for the most part, they were brown. Look at this wonderful patch of clover. Pictures courtesy of Kathy Jentz, my partner in crime. Clover, look at this. Everywhere this summer I saw that was green, it was clover. Clover is a good thing. Do your research. And it's a great lawn alternative. And what's wrong with a little bit of bloom in the midst of green? There's nothing wrong with that. But don't just stick with clover. There are many alternatives to lawns. Before we go there, let's talk about this. How many of you really know your grass type? Is it a fescue? Is it annual rise? Is it a perennial rise? Or is it just weeds? Or are those weeds really clover and other beneficial green plants in disguise? Are you following the protocols for a healthy lawn? Who's fertilizing in spring? Fertilizing in the fall? In Virginia, I was taught, as a Virginia Master Gardener, Rappahannock Master Gardener, we were taught, think about size, September, October, December. So you want to overseed, fertilize, all that kind of good stuff. And you can do that up until December. But before you do all that, I want to encourage all of you all, get a soil test. As a master gardener, we encourage people, take your soil test. And you want to do it now, because in the spring, everyone's going to want to go, oh my goodness, I need to get a soil test. That means the labs are all going to be backed up. Stop. Do it now. Stick your shovel in the ground. Most shovels have a 12-inch head. Stick it in the ground. Move it forward. You want to grab the soil that's at the tip of the shovel, not what's on top. Tip of the shovel. Get it from at least 8 to 10 areas of your yard. Send it off to a good soil testing lab. There are many around. Virginia Tech has one. University of Maryland, I believe, uses Delaware. But call the extension office. They are a reliable resource for all things pertaining to the garden. Makes sense to me, and it's a free resource. Basically free to us now because our taxes pay for this. And when you're cutting that grass that you just have to have so much, can you leave some of the grass clippings? Those roots, if you're overseeding and you got those tender roots trying to thrive in a dry environment, leaving a little bit of those grass clippings will help insulate those roots, creating an environment for them to go down into the soil. And it's like giving them a little coat. It also creates a great environment for our little insects that overwinter in those lawns. Lastly, consider alternatives to grass. White clover, like you saw in the picture, is drought tolerant, takes foot traffic. I mean, let's be honest, our dogs use it. It still comes up and it still blooms. Why not? And then you have things like sweet woodruff. My dad introduced me to this wonderful plant. Why? Because it's fragrant. It's soft. It's easy. It attracts butterflies and bees. And you really don't need a lot of skill set to grow this. Give it a nice semi-shade environment, especially in the heat that we're in now and the dry conditions. A semi-shady environment will help keep those roots moist, and it will just spread. I don't consider it invasive. I don't consider it having happy feet, because if it goes somewhere where you don't want it, pluck it up and move it to where you do. It's a great garden neighbor, as I call it. And let's not forget thyme. Thyme is a wonderful mat-like covering, and from a distance, it looks like, oh my goodness, they have a weed-free lawn, when actually it's a nice mat that's drought tolerant, and it's considered a steppable. So if you step on it, a wonderful fragrance is emitted, and it just kind of makes you go, this is so much better than a lawnmower. And let's think about our ornamental grasses. Ornamental grasses, as we all know by now, come in all heights, colors. Some have blooms, or what they call blooms. Some don't. Some are just interesting because of the colors. Well, one thing I want to tell everyone for all ornamental grasses, be careful about those seed heads. They're great when you want to do a color play, when you want to add movement to your garden, but after first frost, pay attention, do your research, ask a reputable garden center, but you want to cut those seed heads off. Yes, it's good seeds for the birds, but if you don't watch it and you're not careful, unless it's a sterile species, you end up with ornamental grasses over there, down there. I have a client in Virginia. I did give the warning. Now they're in the process of removing some grasses because the grass seed heads got a little too happy. So a lot of things are no longer there because the grasses just took over. Be mindful of those seed heads. Try some of your low-growing perennials, such as chamomile. If you have chamomile in an area where you're not stepping on it, that's great for tea. Who would not want to go, I'm going to go outside and give me some chamomile and dry it out and have a cup of tea? Corsica meant the same thing. I have a neighbor that has an extremely steep hill. When you look at it from afar, it looks like it's grass. It's not grass. It's sedum. And it's beautiful. Of course, I noticed this one morning very early when I was walking my dog, and because I thought everyone else's grass is kind of looking brown and scraggly. His is just nice and green. It was sedum. Paying closer attention to it, I watched that sedum put up beautiful little yellow star-like blooms. Some of it is a blush red. So it adds interest and covers the ground. And the only part I ever see him mowing is the part up top, which makes sense. Be willing to try things. Be daring in your gardens, especially at this time of drought. Consider xeriscaping. I have been a practitioner of xeriscaping forever. I love it. Why? Because I do not have time to stand outside with a hose. My hoses actually have dry rotted because I don't use them. Xeriscaping is the practice of drought-tolerant planting. Think about plants that you can have in assorted heights. They have different bloom times that can handle the heat or not, and they require minimal watering. Now, people say, oh, but you got to water when you first put it in. Of course you do. But once you get it in the ground and it is established, oh my goodness, xeriscaping is often overlooked in many situations. And then, of course, we have native meadows. Oh my goodness. I don't have turf, so my front yard is all flowers. It's my own personal meadow. While others might go, oh, you don't prune your stuff? I let nature be in my garden. Why? Because when I come home, I want to see the butterflies. I want to see the bees. I want to sit outside with my wonderful dog, Precious, and watch the birds come and pluck the seed heads. So I have my own meadow. And in my world, it beats mowing a lawn any day of the week. Last year, American Meadows and Kathy Jentz made this uber push for no mow May. Why? It's important. Think about all the overwintering insects, beneficials. Honestly, without them, we're not eating. We need those insects to do what they're supposed to do at the right time. But if they have stuck with us over the winter at the roots of the turf, near our mulch, at the base of our plants, and they're just holding on, procreating, doing their thing, and then we come through with a lawnmower and mow down their habitat, we can wait till May. We can wait till the end of May. It's not going to hurt anyone. There are tons of lawn signs out there now. Some of them are really cute that you can put up so people will know what you're doing. So they won't think, oh my goodness, they're just not mowing their lawn. No, there's a reason. We're not mowing for intentional purposes. After May, or the end of May, or if you're choosing, Teri, I need my grass manicured. Okay, that's fine. But make an area that you can leave a little bit taller for the pollinators. Doesn't have to all be one height. Have different heights. Diversity is like my middle name. So you can have different heights of grasses, perennials, so-called weeds, plants out of place. And also think about not using non-natural things. Do you really need to put those pesticides down? You think maybe a natural predator can take care of that? Do you really need to throw a whole bunch of fertilizer because you want bloom now? Let's try not. And fertilizer. Let me pause here for a second because here's a cute idea. Take some of those pots that you have that you're going to try to ditch. Put your garden clippings, debris in the pot. Make sure you have a balance of greens and browns. I would use a pot that's brown or black. Tons of black pots out there. Put it at the back of your garden. Make sure the browns and greens are in there. Balance is good. Sprinkle a little soil on top. Keep doing that. You're creating compost on the spot. I love that term. You can use it in your garden again. No need to throw it out, throw it away or whatever. I have little compost on the spot behind every garden in my yard. People might go, oh, you left the pot there. No, I didn't. That's my compost. That way the compost is kept neat. You can do a couple if you want, if you got that much space, or use a general compost pile. But composting is your fertilizer. Generally, we don't need to do that. If you're doing a meadow, here's another idea. When you do cut it, let it lay. The seed heads will drop. Your meadow will intensify. You're still protecting your overwintering insects, especially if you just weed whack and not mow it. And change your mowing habits. Do you really need to be out there every Friday, like ritual? Hey, Bob, and cutting your grass? Or can you change that up every 3 to 4 weeks? Talk to Bob on Fridays as you all are admiring your meadow. Then we have the New American Garden, which is probably how I would classify my garden, my meadow. I have native perennials, assorted grasses, assorted ground covers. I have the non-existent lawn in this aspect. And then all my plants are grouped according to height and needs. Why? Because if I got to reach in here to prune something, but I can put it beside something else I'm already pruning, that makes sense. Less time, you're in one spot at one time, you can move on to something else that may not need pruning. By gardening in this way, and Kelly Norris speaks of this, pay attention to Kelly Norris, look him up if you're not familiar with him. A tapestry of color is what I have always envisioned in my garden. Now, my garden is always in a state of transformation because there's always some new native or some new perennial I've discovered that's drought tolerant because I will not water, that needs to be in my garden. By doing the research and finding these things, I have created a garden that has seasonal interests, 365. Low maintenance. I'm not in there pruning and deadheading a lot. Hollow tubes from plant stems, I'll use those and lay them flat. Why? Because there are certain insects that love that environment over the winter. Less water and my quality of life. I am busy. I'm busy with intention, sharing the love of gardening, but I don't want to be in my garden having to manicure my plants all the time because I want to enjoy life. Diversity is the key in the New American Garden. This is a garden in Buffalo. That's one of my other places I call my other home. You could stand by this garden on the Buffalo Garden Walk and you could hear a symphony of bees, the buzzing, a hummingbird dipped in. You hear that, the wings of the hummingbird. This is the garden I think most people should have. A garden that embraces nature, that says, nature, come on over here. Entertain me. And you can sit back, put the lawnmower in the garage or sell it, and you have something of beauty that you can enjoy over and over and over again. And the beauty of this also is every year it changes. Now, a lot of the plant material in here does not need a lot of water. Why? It's planted closely. Life plants are together. The ground is shaded with ground cover plants. This speaks to a well-loved, well-enjoyed garden. I know that's what I aim for. Back to that xeriscaping. Look at this. It's a beautiful garden. This is a garden in our book, The Urban Garden, 101 Ways to Grow Food and Beauty in the City. It speaks to the perfection of xeriscaping. I love the fact that there's 2 chairs and a table here. Why? Because these people are going to enjoy this garden. They're not going to be out there snipping this and snipping that and, oh, I got to water because it looks dry. This garden maintains itself, has a lot of foliage, more foliage than bloom, key, and I don't know, weather appropriate plantings. Pay attention to xeriscape plants. We are going to need them now and in the future too. Trust me on this. Some of the things that we want to consider as we are living with drought. Consider buying plants that are weather resilient. You have all winter long to do the research. I'm going to suggest a few in a minute. Consider plants that have low watering needs. That is key. We could be in Arizona. I have a coworker that lives in Arizona. There are certain times when they can and cannot water. And if they do decide to go against the rules, they get a fine. Who needs that? We don't need that kind of negativity in our garden life. Pay attention to maintenance requirements. Do you have to rush home every day and get those pruners out because that plant is leaning? Plant in groups. Allow plants to lean on each other for support. It's okay. Deciding on your plants is key. Doing the research in our season of nesting is important, and it can prove to be a time saver once spring starts. The past couple of years, we have seen our garden struggle. It's been real. We've seen plants that they just have a lot of dieback from wind, from drought. Sometimes drought is not obvious on day one, but 6 months down the road, it's like, why is that plant looking like that? One dry shade area of my garden, I lost all these areas. They wanted it a little more moist. In the area of the garden where it's a little more moist, still shady, they're thriving. So observe your garden. Get out there. Don't leave your garden to, it's wintertime, got to go inside. No. Observe your garden. Walk around your garden in all seasons. And then consider some of those plants that are struggling. If you really love them, move them. It's your garden. Sometimes things don't work where they were yesterday, this year. So move it. Give it a chance to thrive. Once again, think about those things that do not need a lot of water. If you've got to run outside every day after work to water your garden, you're detracting from enjoying your garden. I also want to urge everyone to put a seat in your garden, because sometimes, you're always busy in the garden. Pause. All that business you're doing over here, something over here could be struggling from drought. If you can't see everything in one clean sweep, observe different parts of your garden at different seasons and times of the year. This year, everyone was asking that question. How much should I be watering now? One guy even told me the other day, I had to jack up my finances to accommodate my water bill. And I was like, well, you probably aren't planting the right thing. Well, you probably planted the wrong thing. Here's your chance to change it up. Here's a tip. When's the best time to water? In the morning. Why? You want the heat and all, yes, some of that water will evaporate. But if you're watering the foliage, you don't want to have water spots on your leaves. You don't want to have sun scorch on your leaves. So you want to hit it early in the morning or invest in soaker hoses. You can also do irrigation systems, but if you're like me, that's too much to think about. Okay, where's that irrigation line going? But I want to put a plant there. I got to move the irrigation. If you use a soaker hose, it's the easiest way, especially if you're addicted to plants like me. Soaker hoses are the easiest way. You decide you want to put a plant there, move the soaker hose back. I honestly am going to install soaker hoses this year because I see what's on the forefront for all gardens. Things that might not have needed water in the past, they're going to need it. This year, I lost a gardenia that I've had for 19 years. It was outside in the ground. It was great. Last year, I noticed a little dieback, browning of the foliage. I thought with my little jugs of water in my watering can that it would be enough because I water deeply at the root zone, not close to the trunk, but look at how far the branches go out. I water in the middle there. Why? Because I want the water to go down to the root zone. I thought it would be okay, but then I noticed this year it just went downhill. 100-degree temps, it wasn't built for that. So make sure that you're not watering in the middle of the day. Please don't, because you're wasting your time and it's not a good look. Water when it's appropriate. Early in the morning. If something's really struggling, do it after 8 o'clock at night and only water the root zone, not the foliage. Things that require constant fertilization, think about using natural items like your compost to feed it. Only prune or deadhead at the right time and just for the appearance sake. If it's something, I have a friend that cut back her daisies in May, and then she cut them back again in July and wondered why they weren't blooming. Know your plant material. Maybe this year you also noticed that those annuals, I've not ever had much luck with petunias. This year, it was no luck at all. It was too humid, and the 100-degree temps, those petunias were like, I'm out. And I'm okay with that. It just means maybe perhaps I should have done more of a succulent ground cover like Delosperma in those pots that I wanted to have trailing. These are things you need to think about. What are we going to do? In our book, we talk about having a garden journal. Every 7 to 10 days, make a note. Didn't get rain this week. Oh, we got a ½ inch this week. You'll be able to reflect back to see why maybe some plants didn't make it or did make it. What do you have to do more? Maybe that plant needs water every 5 days instead of 7. Make notes. Use a garden journal. And when you water, make sure it's deep. When you water, if the water goes like this, don't tell anyone, but you're not doing it right. It should go down. If it's not going down, create a little cup, so that when you water, the water goes in that cup, and that's just moving the soil, making a low hill, not a mountain, a low hill. Water in that area. That means the water is going to the roots where they need it. Consider increasing your hardscaped areas. I'm not a hardscape person, really. I would prefer to increase my gardens. Get outside all times of the year to see what your garden is doing. It is important. I can't stress this enough. Now we get to my favorite part. Let's talk about some plants. These are gardens in Buffalo once again. The window box, yes, Jim plants that every year. I'm going to suggest that he use some perennials though, but that's another day. But the garden on the right, all perennials. Not a lot of hoses traipsing the ground or anything. Why? Because she chose the right plant, right place. When you're thinking about that, perennials versus annuals, once again. Natives. Natives are going to stand up when others will tell you bye-bye. Consider incorporating some of them into your garden. Do the research. At the same time, maybe something that's, for zone 8, try it. Even though we're kind of a 7A, 7B, 6A or B area, try those zone 8 plants. Trust and believe. If you zone push, it opens up a whole new world. Some of the plants that you'll see at a lot of local garden centers that are commonly used are your phlox, your wood asters. They're great for fall. Geraniums, the native one, it stands up when others will not. Fothergilla, beautiful bloom. And then, of course, your milkweed. These are all commonly suggested plants. But what you need to do is know your zone. Understand your lifestyle. When I say that, if you are busy, do you really have time to commit to coming home every day and watering or pruning or replacing plants? You got to go shopping for those plants. And do you want more foliage than bloom? Will a fern work, or do you want something more like a begonia? Think about that. And also pay attention to your budget. Do you have money to keep replacing things because they're beautiful? If you do have that kind of money, let me know. Common plants that we see. I'm going to go through this a little fast because I want to tell you about some things I found this year, and also some things that my friend Wendy at Cavanagh's suggested that were on point. We see Joe Pye weed beside the road. We know that's going to last. Coreopsis, we know that's going to last because it's built for drought. Your sedums, amazing. Drought tolerant, they hold the moisture in their leaves. You can't go wrong, and there's so many different varieties. Seaboldiani is one of my favorites. It just kind of sprawls, and it's got pink on it, so you know. Monarda. So many of them. In the past, we're used to just seeing the red. I think it's Jacob Klein. Check out punctata. When I tell you this plant offers diversity, sometimes the blooms are pink, they're spotted, they're not spotted, they're white, they come out green. This is a plant that will knock your socks off. It can get a little happy, but take some up, share it with a friend. It's a good thing. Now my picks. These are my tried, tested, and true babies. Why? They must be independent. They must not need me to go, oh, how you doing, baby? No, I don't have that kind of time. They need to be able to show off without any extra attention on their own. These plants do. They need to require minimal maintenance. And they cannot be water dependent, because I am not going to raise my water bill because I want beauty. We must be able to work together. It's a teamwork thing in my garden. The first one is Zizia. Oh my goodness. The blooms were amazing. It is a pollinator attractor like you would not believe. Now, this one I have to pay attention to the seed heads. Otherwise, my garden is going to be the Zizia garden. But it's so pretty. So pretty. Recommended by Wendy. I did it. It was great. Salvia amistad. Now, if you read my Instagram feed, I have been raving about this plant. I am praying it's going to be perennial, but if not, I'm going to get more next year. I'm seeing a hedge of it. Amistad. The purple plant at the forefront of the screen. Oh my goodness. It never stopped blooming. Even in the middle of the 100-degree heat, when the foliage was kind of like, Teri, I need a little bit of water. I took my little milk jug out, gave it a little water. The next morning, it was like, okay, I'm back and I'm fabulous. 3 to 4 foot tall, very open foliage. But when I tell you bee party, it was a bee party every single day. And then when my Rudbeckia started blooming this fall, it was like, I couldn't have designed a better combination, for real. It is an amazing plant. It is something I will eternally have in my garden because it's a love of mine. Helenium, another one, just great. Kind of sat in the back of the garden for a minute, but when it started blooming this fall, it has not stopped. Another pollinator attracting plant. Another recommendation from Wendy at Cavano's. Tunissima, Nacella. I fell in love with this one at the Botanic Garden of all places. It was in the strip beside the street. And all I kept saying for years, I called it my amber waves of grain plant. In the summertime, the wispy foliage would move with the traffic. Absolutely amazing. And then as fall evolved, it just started turning amber. And it was just beautiful. It is beautiful. You can use it in the ground or in a pot. In a pot, it is perfect for draping over the side. Add a pop of color in there, pansies beside it. In the wintertime, that hay-like color is beautiful. Accents anything, especially with black pansies. It's a winner. This one, I had to put all the specs on this one on the screen. Why? I bought this plant up from my Fredericksburg garden 20 years ago. Still have it. That means it's durable. No extra water. It's in the back of my border. Even though the books say it loves full sun, I have it in a part shade area. Now, that has kept it tight, so I'm not seeing it running rampant in that particular garden bed. I'm going to give it a little more sun because I need more of it. It is just beautiful. And when I tell you the bees, it's a bee party going on over there. Now, the books will tell you it spreads by runners. However, part shade, we don't have that problem. Where I planted it 20 years ago, it has come up. It might have increased maybe 6 inches, but it just blooms prolifically. I have it with beautyberry as a combination, which many people go, ooh, blue and purple. It works, especially with a little bit of rutabaga popping up in there. Picks up that yellow. No water. I've not watered this plant for 20 years. Seriously. And then guara, windflower. I have to tell you about this one too. A couple weeks ago, I'm walking Precious. My rutabaga was, blooming. I'm thinking, okay, well, we knew that was coming back. That's cool. But then I saw this hot pink waving above that sea of yellow. And I was like, what is that? Upon closer inspection, it was a guara I got from Cavano's, and oh my goodness, it's still blooming. We're almost to November, y'all. It's still blooming. Hummingbirds love this plant. You can't go wrong. Takes full and part sun. It is one of the main xeriscaping plants. And when I tell you it doesn't like wet feet, water it if you want to. It'll be short-lived. Leave it dry. Dry is a good thing sometimes. Let us not be overwhelmed by drought. It's okay. We can live. My all-time favorite is my Vitex. I love Vitex. I discovered Vitex in a garden in Georgetown probably 15, 16 years ago. I will always have a Vitex in my garden. Why? When I say bee party, the bees flock to this plant. I do not water it at all. Depending on the cultivar, you must allow it room to grow. I have a dwarf cultivar, and I have this one called Queen Bee from Bailey's Nurseries. It is a stunner. It's in the front of my garden because I want the bees to know, over here, come over here. I also don't fertilize it. I cut it back in the spring, comes back every year. It loves medium to dry soil. Winter's coming, y'all. What do we need to look out for? Look out for our precipitation levels. Pay attention to when we're not getting adequate moisture from the heavens. Look at your wind patterns. If something is showing burning on one side, maybe the wind is hitting it too much. Maybe it's a sign of drought. See if you can relocate that plant. It's okay. Relocate it at the right time. Pay attention to the humidity levels in the air. If it's a dry air, a lot of static, think about it. It's not just us that's noticing that. Our plants are too. And pay attention to erratic temperature changes. Sometimes in January, we can get like a 60-degree day. The next day is like 25. Pay attention to your plants. If they're heaving, wait until a nice moderately warm day. Push them down the ground. Keep a little bit of mulch on hand and cover those roots. And don't forget to water them in. Observe, protect, water even in the wintertime, and plant wisely. I cannot tell you this more, how the importance of this is just key. You don't have to lug the hose out there. I keep water jugs, any type of milk jug, juice jug. I use my gray water. If I'm steaming vegetables, I use my shower water sometimes. All that water is going down the drain. Why not use it? Use it. As long as it doesn't have a lot of chemicals in it or butter or grease, use that water. Pay attention to those plants. Water your plants in pots if you want to survive a dry winter. Trust me, at the end of the day, you'll be happy that you paid attention to these basic tips that everyone should know by now. Make sure it's above 40 degrees when you're watering. If it's windy, don't water because you're not doing anything. The wind is going to dry up everything that you're doing if you're watering when it's windy. Your evergreens and shallow-rooted plants, they need water. Once again, you don't have to drag the hose out, but a little jug will do you. And not on the foliage, the roots. It's all about the roots. The roots run deep, or the roots that are shallow along the surface, that's what needs the water. That's what's going to provide life to your plants. And make sure you water between the trunk or the crown of a plant and the drip line or the canopy. If you've got a shrub and the foliage or the branches go out to here, you want to water like where my thumb is. That's what's going to hit both surrounding and up close. Most importantly, it's going to go deep. Check your gardens at least once a month. I say check your plants. I walk around my garden every day. I don't care if it's snowing, raining, sleeting. Why? Because I want to catch problems before they start. And with this drought, sometimes you're not going to see the damage the drought has done until winter. So look for browning tips, drooping and dull leaves. These are common factors that let you know something's going on. And it might have just been the drought. Water at the root zone. See if that helps a little bit. Here's a couple books. You need some winter reading? Well, The Urban Garden. 101 Ways to Grow Food and Beauty in the City. Always a game changer. Our book has concepts that will get you thinking about what you can and cannot do. And with those meadows, cut flower growers, did you know there are drought-tolerant plants that you too can grow to use in arrangements? Wendy's Picks, that's one of the handouts, has one that I love as foliage filler, Amsonia hubrectii. Oh my goodness, game changer. I invite you all to follow me. All my Instagram stuff is here, and it's also on the handout. But more importantly, this is what I want everyone that's listening today to do. Get outside, get in your garden, see what's possibly stressed from the drought that we've had all winter, all summer, so that you can have plants that will survive as we go through the winter. Because we're on a roll here, and I'm sorry, we haven't had rain in quite a while. You better get outside and start looking. Thank you.
Wow. I should have grabbed my sunglasses. Oh, you are so cool, Teri.
Thanks, Courtney.
You are so cool. Oh, we have so many good questions going on in the chat. We've enjoyed learning about these drought-tolerant pro tips. I know I learned quite a bit. Like I'm looking at my little patch with my hands on my hips, like, okay, I got some work to do. I got some work to do. So here's a couple of questions, Teri. Um, so first we have recommendations for deer. Okay. The question is, do you have plant recommendations for areas where deer roam? This participant says, I know nothing is deer proof, but deer resistant would be helpful. Any tips for us?
Um, Deer resistant is the operative word,
Ah.
and it consistently changes because there are some plants that are quote unquote deer proof. They were deer proof, but they're no
Mhm.
longer deer proof. I will say, lessons learned from other garden communicators, like Ruth Clausen Rogers. Um, Sage. Deer do not like that fuzzy leaf.
Aha.
Lamb's ears, another one. They don't, that fuzzy leaf doesn't fit with their tongue well. There's even a rhododendron that has a fuzzy leaf. It's fuzz on the underside of the leaf. Do your
Uh-huh.
research,
Uh-huh.
but that's one that deer will leave alone. And everyone loves a good rhododendron or azalea in the spring.
Yeah.
Look for those things with fuzzy leaves. And also remember, what deer love today, they're like us. They may not like it tomorrow.
Got it. Got it. That's awesome. That makes me think about our exhibit here, Fierce Flora, right? Some of the ways that plants have adapted in order to fight off those predators. So it sounds like we just learned about an adaptation today. Terry, you are just amazing. So let's talk a little bit about veggies. Okay, we have a question about veggies. Are there ways you can maintain a veggie garden that require less water? For example, is there like certain types of mulch, any type of planting pattern, something like that that require less water for a veggie garden?
Cover your soil. That is
Oh.
the key. Cover your soil. I used to run I was a member of a CSA and one of the founding farmers of a CSA in Stafford, Virginia.
Mhm.
We use newsprint that only use soy ink. So
Huh.
if you want to practice the rules of being organic, pay attention. No glossy paper. It's all online.
Okay.
However, we use newsprint. We use brown paper bags.
Hmm.
That was what we put around our plants, and we watered deeply. Watering deeply, I could say this a zillion times a day. Water deeply one day versus a sip a day. You're doing more good watering deeply. So as long
Okay.
as you cover your soil, straw that doesn't have seeds in it, you can
Uh-huh.
use grass clippings free. Use grass clippings when
Okay.
for those that have lawns, or if you know your neighbors always. This is my good trick. You know your
Yeah.
neighbors always cutting their grass, and they put in those cute little brown bags. That to me means that you wrapped it up for me to take and borrow. Ask them,
Okay.
ask them. But those grass clippings, if they don't have fertilizer or chemicals on them,
Yeah.
if you sprinkle that, especially in a veggie garden, put it around the base of your plants, you just locked in moisture.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like you got some folks that got some amens here. Folks say yes, I do that with my grass clippings too. I think
Free is
sometimes
good.
the challenge is to see if there's like fertilizer or something else that's like in there. I think that would be the only challenge there. But get to know your neighbors, right? You would say, "Hey, Bob," right? I cracked up, because
Well,
that
if
is what we
let
do. A
me
lot of times we come outside, we get in our gardens and we get with our neighbors, right? But then there's a way to have a different conversation now. There's
mhm.
a way to have some different conversations about what we're growing, how we're growing it. Um, we have a question about, is it a juga or creeping Jenny instead of grass? Now we looked it up a little bit, Emily and I, and they may be invasive by a particular state or region. But what do you think about that idea of a juga or creeping Jenny instead of grass? And please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing a
No,
juga.
you're
Is that
good.
right?
You're good. And I really, I have,
Yeah.
this is my perspective.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
I wouldn't have either one of them in my garden.
Okay.
Why? Because I'm, I should be in front of my books. I have books that totally cover the wall behind me.
Yeah.
I am always researching and I always pay attention to what is on the Department of Agriculture invasive species list.
Okay.
I don't care how pretty it is. Oh, the bloom is beautiful. Oh, it attracts
Mhm.
bees. If it says in the mid-Atlantic it's invasive, I am not putting it in my garden.
Yep.
And I know I dumped a planter, which is, I try to grow things from seed, and I'm really cautious when it comes to my garden. I had a
Mhm.
planter that someone had gifted me, and it had creeping Jenny in it. I dumped the planter in the winter because I took the heuchera out, dumped the
Uh-huh.
planter because there was nothing else visible.
Mhm.
I'm still pulling up creeping Jenny. I don't appreciate it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Even
that's
after dumping it.
even after dumping it because it was in the soil, maybe a root or something.
Yeah.
And when I sat down and I wrote 2 books in a year. I sat
Mhm.
down and read the books. Some things I didn't pay attention to. Creeping Jenny was like, "Ooh, this is a party place. I'm just gonna hang
Oh.
out here and I'm gonna spread my love," and it has. I'm still pulling
Mhm.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We have a participant who says that their creeping Jenny is pretty, but it spreads really quickly. And it dies back in the heat of the summer, and they also have to dig out to get rid of it. I mean, it sounds like
Hmm.
a lot of work, hence
Right.
why it would be on the list. Yeah,
Right. Right.
got
And
it.
that's why it's on the invasive species list. I
Yeah.
remember years ago, and I shared this earlier about red maples.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a seminar at the Botanic Garden, and the presenter was saying how eventually, because they did an aerial view showing all these red maples in the woods in Pennsylvania. They're like, oh, she was like, one day this is going to become invasive.
Wow.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Look at all the maple trees you find in your yard.
Wow. And see, what we did was we just dropped that invasive species list, well, not the list, but a link to the list in
Hmm.
our chat, because it sounds like it's something that we kind of just need to tap back into every once in a while, even if you think even if like you had an idea, it's good to just tap back in. And a big part of your talk today is saying things are changing. Things
Yeah.
are changing. And so we
Yeah.
want to stay up to date with what's going on in the world and how this has impacted us and how we connect with our gardens.
Hmm.
We had another comment here, and our participant said that I've long loved intentionally neglecting her Capitol Hill DC garden, and was considering planting a couple of new things the other day, and then saw that Yuma, a type of citrus, works in an 8B zone, and also found on the search that DC is 8A, 8B, but according to that map, it looks like we're in a lower zone. What are your thoughts on zones and growing citrus?
Number one, woe to the zone pusher. I love it.
Okay.
That is why I have my Camellia LA beside my house. Think about it. These tall buildings, brick houses, tall tree canopies,
Mm-hmm.
it holds in heat in the wintertime. At the
Okay.
same time, in the summertime, these tree canopies cool us down. So when you're planting things and you're pushing the zone,
Mm-hmm.
try something new. I knew sincerely when I bought my house 21 years now, 21 years ago, I knew because I just kind of stood on the side of my house in all seasons. And I knew it's really warm over here.
Hmm.
When I go into the front in January, it's really hot. I go into the back, it's like, oh, it's a little nippy. And I thought, my camellias are going to be fine.
Mm.
And they have been.
Yeah.
So I agree with her. Intentional neglect is a good thing. Keep it
Mm-hmm.
neat. But intentional neglect, it has benefits.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the key word here, as you said earlier, is intentional, right? You even go out into your garden in the wintertime. What are you looking for in the wintertime, Teri? What are you looking for?
Blooms. I have camellias that bloom in the wintertime.
Okay.
Sarcocoa, which is a
Mm,
sub shrub or perennial. It
okay.
only gets to 18, 24 inches tall in February. The gift to myself is to walk around my garden on a February morning and you smell this sweet fragrance. It's Sarcocoa.
Ah,
Wouldn't know it if you weren't inside looking out the window going, that's a
you
nice
right.
evergreen.
No, you're right. You are
Yeah.
absolutely right. We got to go out there. And so does watering, I think I heard you mention this, but I just want to make sure watering happens in the wintertime.
Oh, yes, ma'am, it does.
Huh.
With this new climate we got going on now,
Yeah.
oh, yes, it does.
Okay.
Walk around. Your plants will talk to you. You have to have
Okay.
open ears and an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
But if the foliage looks dull, if you see browning tips,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's too late. But a jug will do you.
Okay.
Just get out there and water the root zone. You're not doing anything if you're watering the foliage. Mother Nature has that.
Okay.
It's the roots. It's all about the root zones.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And so going back really quickly, because now my head is spinning about wintertime watering, but I do want to address two things that are in the chat. We see that pomegranates can grow well here in DC, right? We also, but we still want to know about citrus. So you think it's a good idea, or because I had a couple more folks kind of tune in?
Try it.
Try
Nothing beats a failure but a try. 2-3 years ago, one of my community garden members, I had given her a lemon tree.
Huh.
She left it outside over the winter beside her house. I think it was a Meyer lemon beside her house in a semi-shady area in the winter. It was fine. The next year, it had doubled in size, and this is in a pot, mind you.
Okay.
It had doubled in size. When she put it back in the community garden, that was the first summer we got the blaze on heat.
Yeah.
Didn't make it. So even things like that, things that make you think about citrus and other things. I had a tomato plant that actually produced tomatoes in my shade garden. Who knew? Tomatoes, and in some southern states, I've seen and heard tell of people putting shade cloth over their tomato plants because the heat was just so intense. They got more from the plants covered with the shade cloth than the ones in the blaze on sun.
Wow.
It's changing. Let's adapt.
It's changing. And so a couple of our takeaways before we wrap up, because we are out of time, man. But I know it's always such a heartbreak because we want to know so much more. But it does sound like, one, just acknowledging the fact that things are changing, no matter what the little code names are that they're giving this thing, that perhaps drought is a very real thing. And we just need to go ahead and take it seriously, take on the steps, actually go out there in the garden year round, allow your garden to be yours, try out new things, consider like your watering practices, and let's see what we can change up, because things are indeed changing. So I thank you so much, Teri. Thank you so much for being here with us. This was such a wonderful talk. Thank you all so much for sharing your afternoon with us this lovely Friday. Grab those sunglasses, get on outside, right? See how certain parts of your house feel in the front and the back, see what you can grow. And we just thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. Thanks so much, Emily, for holding us down, for the chat and for the questions. You all have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.